Hey everybody, it's Miss Stock. So today is a day where I get to do a little bit more slope with you guys. I'm actually coming to you guys off of a half day that we just had. Do you guys remember the half day? It was right before Christmas. It's called Early Release Day. Fun fact, you may need that later. But I'm going to talk more about slope with you guys, and then this time it's going to be taking the slope and actually writing the whole equation. Just as a fun reminder, the entire equation that we are looking at is y equals mx plus b. Another fun fact is that m is our slope, always and forever. Need to know that. So, just real quickly, when we're walking through the steps of this, you want to find the slope first. So, easy breezy. We should know how to do that by now. And then step 2, B, which is talking about this B right here, that is what we call our y-intercept. We'll talk a little bit about specifically what that looks like here in a minute, but it is where x is 0. And I tried to type the 0. There we go, 0. So we're going to find slope, we're going to find where x is 0, that's going to be our y-intercept, and then we're going to put it into this equation, y equals mx plus b. So let's go ahead and jump into the first problem. We're going to start on this side, and the first step again is to find slope. So if you remember from the video that we made, or that I made, excuse me, not too long ago, or that you listened to not too long ago, you want to find the change in y, that's going to go on top, over the change in x, that's going to go on the bottom. So our change in y's is plus 4 going all the way down. And again, if you're not good with figuring that out in the negative world, just jump to your positives. Obviously, if you go from 1 to 5, that is 4. So 4 is going to go on the top. And then if I figure out my change in my x's, that's going to be a plus 2 going all the way down. So 2 on the bottom. Now, remember you always want to make sure you simplify. And 4 over 2, again, you can use your Desmos or your handheld, but 4 divided by 2 is 2. Just kind of walking you through this easily for the first one. Now, something I did not do a good job of in my other video was making sure that you guys knew that slope is always m. I could go into a whole long video about why slope is always m, or why they chose m as the letter. It doesn't really matter. You just kind of need to memorize that in our equation, when we're talking about slope, that is the m. So if I were to write the equation y equals mx plus b, I know my m, it's 2. So I can go ahead and plug that in. Now, when it has an x, the y's and the x, guys, that's talking about numbers on your chart or numbers on your graph. So we don't have to worry about all of those. There's 1,000 of them. But I do at least know that m is 2. And then my x, again, those are just numbers on your chart. And then b. B is going to be your y-intercept. So up here it says step 2, B is where x is 0. And I'm going to explain to you what that means actually using a graph. So I have these numbers right here, 0, -7, 2, -3, 4, 1, and 6, 5. And I'm actually going to show you by using an actual graph. So my first point was 0 and then -7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then my next one is 2, -3, and then my next one is 4, 1, and then, that's -1, isn't it? Try that one again. 4, 1, and then my last one is 6, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 5. Now, something I want to point out to you guys, and just, you need to remember this, is that your lines go on infinitely in both directions. So make sure that it goes one way in one direction with, you know, like a nice little arrow, always, always, always going that way, and then your other line goes this way in that direction, always, always, always. So, another thing to remember is that this is your x and this is your y axis. And if we are looking for the y-intercept, that's what B is. It's called your y-intercept. Y and then intercept. You know what? I'm going to type that though because that's going to be terrible if I try to write it. Intercept. It is called your y-intercept. And it's literally what you think it sounds like. It's where the y, or where this line, excuse me, intercepts the y-axis or crosses the y-axis. And if this is my y-axis, it intercepts or crosses right here. And that point was the very first point I did. It was 0, -7. So all of these points on the y-axis, like this is a point on the y-axis, this is a point on the y-axis, they're all going to have 0 as the first number, and then the second number is exactly where the point is. So when you are looking for the y-intercept, it is always where your first number is 0. And that's your x value, where x is 0. So if I go back up to my graph, I can see x is 0 right here, which means my y-intercept is -7. It crosses the graph at -7. So I'm going to write -7, and that would be my full equation. Now, you may not have caught on quickly the first time, but I am going to do, obviously, some more examples with you, so hopefully you can catch on this time. Remember, the first step is to find slope. So my change in y is +2. And again, if you can't figure that out from the negatives, jump down to the positives. To get from 1 to 3 is obviously +2. And then my change in my x's is +3, and it is consistent going all the way down the chart. So my slope is going to be 2/3. Follow my color codes. And that doesn't simplify, actually. I know that one already. It is still 2/3. So my slope, which we now know is m, is 2/3. So y equals 2/3 x. But I don't know my b yet. Remember, y equals mx plus b. But I do know the hint is to figure out where x is 0. That'll be where it intercepts, and I see it on the chart. Here's where my x is 0. So that means it crosses at -1. So to just kind of show you on the graph, it would cross right here if I were to graph this line. And it would probably go up and down like this through that yellow point. So it crosses at -1, so I'm going to write -1. And that is my full equation. Y equals 2/3 x minus 1. So we found the slope first, then we figure out where is x 0, or we can graph it if we need to graph it and figure out where it crosses that the y-axis, because it's called a y-intercept, and that is going to be what we put right here in the B spot. So we're filling in a number for M, and we're filling in a number for B. All right, I'm going to do one more with you, and then I want you to do another one on your own. So on the next one, again, we always find the change in y first. And it is +16. If you're not good with your mental math, always use a calculator to figure that out. And then my changes in y's are pretty easy to recognize. That's just +1. And remember, it's always change in y over the change in x. So that would be 16/1, which is our slope. And 16/1 is just 16. So in our equation, y equals mx plus b, I know that my m, or my slope, is 16. So I'm going to put that there. Y equals 16x, and then I don't know my b yet. But the trick, like I've told you, is to always figure out where x is 0. Where x is 0. but there's no x is 0. So there's always the option to go and graph these numbers just like we did down here. You can graph them and figure out, well, where does it cross the y-axis? Or there's another trick. If x of 0 is not on your graph, you can add it to your graph. Guys, if this is going this way and going plus 1, can I go minus 1? And if I do 1 minus 1, then I'm finally at 0. So it's almost like I figured out, okay, where would 0 belong and how can I put it in there? So instead of going plus 1, I went minus 1. So the same thing goes on this side. Instead of going plus 16, I'm going to go minus 16. And 16 minus 16, that's another 0. And that's a very special crossing. Does anyone remember what it means to cross at 0? 0, 0 to be exact. If you cross at 0, 0, we call that the origin. And that means if you go through 0, 0, you are a proportional line. And proportional lines, we had just this part listed, y equals, and we called it kx in 7th grade. We didn't have a plus or minus anything on the end of it. So this is a proportional line that went through 0. A multiple choice test will only put y equals 16x. They won't put the plus 0 on the end. You can, and it won't hurt anything. Alright, I'm going to pause. I want you to pause and try to do this last example on your own. Remember, if 0 isn't listed, you're trying to figure out, well, where can I put 0? Alright guys, so final answer on this one, I got the slope is negative 1/3. It was going down 1 and then plus 3, so that's again negative 1 over 3. So I put that there. X of 0 was not on the graph. Now there was a y that is 0, but that does not count. That will not be the same when you go to graph those points. It will not cross the y-axis at 12. So I had to follow the same pattern that I did earlier. Instead of doing plus 3, I went minus 3. And 3 minus 3 got me to my 0 that I needed. Which meant I had to do the same thing over here. Instead of minus 1, minus 1, minus 1, I had to do plus 1. And 3 plus 1 would have given me 4. So this one was a little bit trickier just because the patterns were a little backwards. But it is plus 4 as your y-intercept. Again, if you're not catching on to this, guys, you can always take those points and graph them just like I did down here at the bottom and figure everything out from the graph. Alright, we're going to transition into the next section of your notes, which is slope-intercept form from 2 points. I did go a little out of order because I just felt like the tables were going to be the easiest to start with. But slope-intercept form from 2 points does take a little bit of algebra, which I love. I just know that other people do not. So just as a reminder, even though you've been given 2 points, if you like the 2 points and want to use the table form, you can put them into a table form. If you like graphing, you can put them into a graph form. You've got options. But there was a formula that we used for this one that I will write down real quickly. If you remember, you have your x's and your y's. And you have 2 y's and you have 2 x's. And you always do y's on top, but y2 minus y1 goes on top. And then x2 minus x1 goes on the bottom. So my y's, so 1 minus 4 goes on top. And then my, didn't switch colors. And then my x's. And x2 is 3, x1 is 2, and then I subtract. And I get negative 3 over positive 1. So my slope is going to be negative 3. And I know that, guys, in my head. Again, if you need to use your calculator, please do. Negative 3 divided by positive 1 is negative 3, just to prove it to you. But our slope is negative 3. Now, remember, we're trying to figure out the whole formula today. And like I told you earlier, you know your m, so go ahead and plug in your m. It's negative 3. This time you're going to have to use algebra to figure out your b. Earlier I said your y's and your x's are just numbers on your graph, and these are numbers on your graph. And you have 2 x's and you have 2 y's, but for your equation you only need to pick one. You need to pick 1 y and 1 x. So I'm going to pick the first one just because I like even numbers. And I'm going to plug them into this equation. So in the one that I picked, I know that my y is 4. And I know that my x is 2. But when I plug it right here, it's not going to be 32, it's going to be 3 times 2. And I am going to work backwards until I figure out, well, what is b? 4 again is still 4. I'm going to clean up this right side and say negative 3 times 2 is 6, and then plus b. And guys, hopefully from this point you just see that you're supposed to do minus 6 and b equals negative 2. So I now know 2 things. I know that my slope is negative 3, and I now know that my y-intercept, or my b, is negative 2. So if I want to write that into a final equation, it would be negative 3x and then minus 2. You just take your slope and plug it in, and take your y-intercept that you figured out and plug it in, and then you have the final equation. So again, I'll do another one with you. If I'm going too fast at any time, just pause it, no big deal. I'm just labeling my y's first because I want to make sure I put those on top. Negative 3 minus, and that's a negative 1. Be careful, that has a lot of negatives. And then 4 minus 3. Now, this would be a keep, change, or you can just throw it in your calculator. But I know that that's going to be negative 2, and then that is going to be 1, and that simplifies to negative 2. So I have my slope. Now, I'm going to plug in, well, I'm going to write the formula first. I now know that my slope is negative 2, so I'm going to plug that in right here for m. I'm going to pick a point because I need an x and I need a y, and that's exactly what these are. They're x's and y's. I'm just going to pick the first one. You could pick the second one if you want. We should come up with the same answer. My y is negative 1, so I'm going to put that in the y spot. And my x is 3. And remember, when you plug that in on this side, that's multiplication. And then I'm trying to figure out what b is, so I don't know that yet. Negative 1 is still negative 1. I can do this right here, which is negative 6 plus b. Now this time, to get rid of a negative 6, I have to do a plus 6. So b equals, and negative 1 plus 6 is 5. So I know that my slope is negative 2, and my b is 5. So this is my final equation for this problem. And I'm going to pause it and do this one, and then you can pause it and do yours, and we'll check it together. Alright, so I was almost finished. I thought I would solve it with you guys kind of towards the end together. Please make sure on the slope you got negative 1 over negative 1, which simplifies to a positive 1. Be careful with that. And then I chose the second point over here to plug in. So I put my 18 in the y spot, my 12 in the x spot. Remember, that means to multiply. So I'm down to this last step where I do a minus 12, and b equals 6. So I know that my slope is 1 and my b is 6, and I just have to plug them into the equation. Now, something I need you to remember, 1x is never something you've ever written, not even in 6th grade. Remember, we just hide the 1 and put x plus 6. And I need to make that look more like a 6, don't I? But it is x plus 6 as your final answer, not 1x plus 6. A multiple choice test will always hide the 1. Now, if you were to put the 1, no big deal. We wouldn't count it wrong. Alright guys, I hope that clears up how to write a full y equals mx plus b from either 2 points or a table. And remember, you can always use a graph if you need to. It's always a backup.